Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time all the way back to the Middle Ages. Forget those polished movies and romantic novels. Tonight we're not visiting some gleaming fairy tale fortress. We're going to get real about what life was actually like for the people from the lowliest servant to the highest lord inside a medieval castle. It's a place you've probably imagined as a bastion of glory and power, but trust me, after tonight, you'll be pretty darn grateful for your modern plumbing, central heating, and, well, just about everything else. I'm going to paint a picture so vivid you might just feel a phantom draft or catch a whiff of something truly unpleasant. It's the kind of place where a simple trip to the latrine could be a life-changing event and not in a good way. You probably wouldn't last a week. You'd be cold, you'd be hungry, and you'd be absolutely, irredeemably bored. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're up for it, drop a comment with your location and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing on a muddy track, the kind of road that seems to hold the ghost of 1,000 seasons of rain. In the distance, a looming silhouette cuts a jagged line against the bruised twilight sky of a castle. It's not the pristine white stone beacon you've seen on postcards. The walls are a mottled gray, stained with centuries of grime and the black streaks of smoke. A thin, sickly fog hangs over the ground, and as you get closer, a heavy, earthy scent begins to seep into your senses, a mix of wet stone and something else. Something you can't quite place yet, but your stomach instinctively clenches. The drawbridge groans under your weight, the thick, splintered planks slick with moss. You cross the moat, an inky, motionless trench of water. From this vantage point, you finally understand the origin of that smell. The moat isn't just a defensive feature, it's the castle's ultimate garbage disposal. Waste from the latrine's kitchen scraps, animal carcasses, and all the random, unwanted detritus of human existence has been dumped here for generations. The water bubbles lazily in a few spots, releasing little puffs of stench that are so powerful they almost have a flavor. You reflexively pull your collar up over your nose, but it's no use. The smell gets into your clothes, your hair, your very skin, and you can already feel the invisible grime settling over you like a second skin. It's the kind of scent that seems to cling to your memory, a permanent souvenir of a time when hygiene was a concept that had yet to be invented. You're barely past the gatehouse, and already you're a walking, breathing testament to the fact that cleanliness was truly not a virtue here. You can't help but think about your nice, sanitized bathroom back home with its crisp, clean scents, and you wonder how long you could possibly endure this assault on your senses. The portcullis, a menacing grid of iron teeth, rises with a screech, and you step into the bailey, the large courtyard that forms the heart of the castle. This place is a chaotic tapestry of life, all of it messy. Mud is everywhere. It's not just the ground, it's on the hem of every tunic, the legs of every dog, and caked onto the boots of every person you pass. You step over a puddle that's more brown sludge than water, and try to avoid eye contact with a man attempting to fix a cartwheel with what looks like a blunt stick. A goose hisses at you from a nearby pen, and its indignant squawk is swallowed by the cacophony of barking dogs, shouting guards, and the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer. The air is thick with smoke from a dozen different cook fires, each adding its own greasy, sooty layer to the general atmosphere. The ground is littered with discarded bits of rope, scraps of cloth, and bones that have been picked clean by the local dogs and then left to bake in the sun. This is the very essence of the castle's day-to-day existence, a constant low-grade hum of dirt and dysfunction. You feel a sudden sense of exhaustion just from being here. You watch as a scullion, a young kitchen servant, stumbles past, carrying a bucket of what must be slop. He trips and the contents splash across the packed earth, a thick gray slurry of kitchen refuse that the dogs immediately descend upon. The smell of rotting meat and soured porridge is an almost physical presence, and you can't help but notice the man who tripped doesn't even pause to clean it up. He just keeps walking, the empty bucket swinging at his side. It's just another part of the scenery, another addition to the organic mess that makes up the castle's flooring. This place isn't just dirty, it's a living, breathing ecosystem of filth. It's a fact that for the vast majority of the people living here, the concept of a clean environment simply didn't exist. Their daily lives were a constant negotiation with dirt germs and disease, and they often didn't even realize the threat. As you make your way towards the Great Hall, you notice a row of what look like simple wooden outhouses built along the inner wall. These are the latrines. They're essentially just wooden boxes with holes cut in the top, positioned over a chute that drops all the way straight down into the moat below. There's no privacy, no toilet paper you'd be using hay moss, or maybe just a hand, and the smell is so overwhelming that you instinctively hold your breath as you pass by. This is the reality of waste management in a medieval castle, and it serves as a powerful reminder that while the castle was a symbol of power, it was also a fortress built on its own waste. The Great Hall itself, a symbol of royal grandeur, is no less susceptible to these unpleasant realities. You enter through a heavy oak door, and the first thing you notice is the smell, which is somehow even worse than the Bailey. The scent of stale food, unwashed bodies, and the lingering odor of smoke and animal droppings hangs in the air like a thick cloud. The floor is covered in what's called a rush, a layer of straw and herbs. It sounds romantic, but you soon learn its true purpose. The rushes are a catch-all for everything that falls to the floorbones, uneaten scraps, spilled ale, and the bodily waste of the dogs that wander freely through the hall. They are rarely cleaned and are replaced only once or twice a year. This means you are essentially walking on a compost heap of medieval life, a testament to the lack of basic sanitation. You can't shake the feeling that every step you take is a trip through a microscopic minefield of bacteria. It's a popular historical fact that rushes were a primary source of disease, harboring fleas and rats that carried plagues and other illnesses. You watch as a serving boy drops a crust of bread onto the floor, brushes it off with his sleeve, and then puts it back on a platter. No one seems to notice or care. It's just how things are done. You're invited to sit at a long wooden table, the surface of which is sticky and scarred from years of use. There are no plates. Instead, you're given a thick slice of stale bread called a trencher, which serves as your plate. The food, a chunky stew of some kind of unrecognizable meat and vegetables, is plopped directly onto it. You're expected to eat off the trencher, and then when you're done, you can either eat the trencher itself if you're hungry enough, or more likely toss it to the dogs that are already milling about under the table, growling at one another over scraps. This is a far cry from the delicate feasts you've read about. It's a messy, chaotic affair, and you find yourself constantly battling flies that seem to be attracted to the open vats of food and the general filth. The concept of personal space doesn't exist here. You are pressed shoulder to shoulder with others, each person adding their own personal scent to the pungent blend of the room. You watch a lord a few seats down sneeze directly onto the food in front of him, before resuming his meal completely unfazed. It's an unsettling detail that really drives home the vast chasm between your modern understanding of health and safety and their complete lack of it. Historians still debate whether medieval people were more immune to these conditions or simply died younger because of them. What's not up for debate is that a simple cut or scrape, something you would treat with a Band-Aid and a dab of antiseptic, could turn into a life-threatening infection here. The same applies to the food. You can't tell how long this stew has been sitting out, or if the meat in it was even good to begin with. You just have to eat it and hope for the best, because to refuse would be a grave insult. The sense of pervasive dirtiness, the constant threat of illness, and the general lack of personal hygiene are the true hallmarks of this life. It's not just a matter of inconvenience. It's a constant low-level war against the very environment you live in. And this is just the Great Hall. What about the bedrooms, the kitchens, the armory? Every part of the castle is a testament to the fact that life here was a grimy, unglamorous struggle. The air in the Great Hall, thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and stale food, is a heavy blanket that weighs you down. You can feel the grease in the air, a kind of film that seems to stick to your face and hair, making you feel perpetually unclean. It's an interesting detail that many castles had small windows and limited ventilation, which only served to trap these odors and create a kind of pressurized funk that was almost impossible to escape. And remember that moat. It's not just there for show. It's a testament to the fact that the castle was, in a very real sense, a contained ecosystem of filth, a self-sustaining cycle of waste and decay that was the price of living in such a powerful fortress. The smell, the lack of cleanliness, the constant presence of disease. It all adds up to a sobering realization. The medieval castle wasn't a place of heroic romance. It was a practical, fortified home where you were always just a little bit gross. And as you try to get comfortable on a wooden bench that is probably home to a whole ecosystem of its own, you can't help but think that a nice warm bed, a hot shower, and a clean pair of pajamas feel like the greatest luxuries in the world right about now. The thought of sleeping here with all these sights and smells is almost as unsettling as the very real presence of a rat scurrying across the floor in the corner of your eye. The noise of the hall begins to fade as your eyelids grow heavy, and the last thing you notice before drifting off is the unsettling reality that even when you are at rest, the constant symphony of filth never truly stops. You stir not from the discomfort of the hard bench, but from a smell so profound it seems to have seeped into your very dreams. It's a multi-layered scent, a tapestry of unpleasantness woven from countless sources. The sweet cloying aroma of unwashed bodies, the sharp acidic tang of stale ale, the musty decay of damp stone, and underpinning it all the heavy pungent odor of everything else. This is the true inescapable atmosphere of a medieval castle, and you realize that your nose, accustomed to the antiseptic air of the modern world, is about to embark on a journey it is not prepared for. The great hall which seemed so grand and imposing just a moment ago is now a cathedral of foulness. You remember the rushes on the floor from last night. Now, in the harsh early morning light that filters through the small high windows, you can truly see them for what they are, a living, breathing compost pile. Over the course of the night, more scraps have fallen, more ale has been spilled, and the dogs have undoubtedly left their own little contributions. The rushes trap all this grime and liquid, releasing a constant earthy miasma of decay. It's like being trapped in a barn that has never ever been cleaned, only with more people and fewer doors. You can see why a popular modern joke about medieval times is that everyone must have had a perpetually runny nose just to survive, but the reality is likely far more grim. They just had no choice but to endure it. And the smells don't stop there. As you step out into the bailey, you are greeted by a new set of olfactory assaults. The stables built against the inner curtain wall release a powerful scent of horse manure and damp straw. The pigsties located a little further away contribute their own distinct sour note to the air. You pass the kitchens, and a sudden wave of rancid fat and burning wood makes you gag. The chefs here cook with animal fat and lard, which has a much lower smoking point than modern oils. It's constantly burning, adding a greasy, acrid note to the air that seems to cling to your clothes and hair. But it's not just the cooking, it's the food itself. Without refrigeration, meat and dairy spoiled quickly. The strong spices that were so highly prized in the Middle Ages weren't just for flavor, they were a necessary tool to mask the taste and, crucially, the smell of food that was well past its prime. You can't help but wonder how many times you've had a meal that by today's standards would have you running for the nearest hospital. A common historical fact is that personal hygiene was by and large an afterthought. Most people, even the nobility, would only bathe a few times a year. The rest of the time they relied on perfumes and scented herbs to try and cover the smell of their own bodies. But it's a futile effort. You can almost taste the musty scent of unwashed wool and human sweat in the air as people bustle past you, their clothes worn for weeks or even months without a proper wash. You see a noblewoman walking by and she smells vaguely of lavender, but it's a scent that clashes horribly with the underlying aroma of her unwashed body and the general grime of the castle. It's an interesting detail that many castles had a room called a garderobe, a fancy name for a toilet. These were often built in the thick walls and had a chute that led directly to the moat or cesspit below. But their name, garderobe, literally means to guard the robes. They were often used as a wardrobe, as the constant draft of cold air from the chute was thought to repel fleas and other insects. It was a useful, if utterly bizarre, secondary purpose for the castle's bathroom. You find yourself drawn toward the latrine building you noticed yesterday. Up close, it's even worse. The smell is so powerful it seems to vibrate a concentrated essence of everything you've been smelling, multiplied by 100. There are no doors, no stalls, just a row of communal holes. It's a powerful reminder that privacy, like so many other modern comforts, was a foreign concept here. And the stench, it's not just an inconvenience. It's a constant visceral presence that shapes every moment of your day. It's in the food you eat, the clothes you wear, and the air you breathe. It clings to the walls, the stone floors, and the wooden beams of the castle, a permanent reminder of the messy reality of medieval life. You can just imagine a particularly cruel lord saying, "My castle doesn't just have a moat for defense, it has a scent-based defense system. It's guaranteed to make any invading army lose their lunch." It's an easy jab to make now, but the reality of living in such a place where even the air itself feels polluted would be a daily trial. Historians still debate whether medieval people simply adapted to this constant olfactory assault, or if the pervasive stench was a daily torment they simply had to endure. It's a fascinating question because we can never truly know what it was like for them to smell this way all the time. But based on the historical records we do have, it seems clear that this was simply the way of the world. A peasant in the fields would have smelled of sweat and soil, and a person in the castle would have smelled of smoke and refuse. The smell of the privy would have been just a fact of life, as common as the sound of the blacksmith's hammer. There were no alternatives, no air fresheners, no scented candles. There was just the air you had, and you learned to live with it. You see a man walking by carrying a large bucket. He looks miserable. It dawns on you that he is a gong farmer or a night soil man, someone whose job it is to empty the communal cesspits. This was a truly unpleasant task, often done at night to avoid the worst of the daytime heat and the notice of the castle's residents. The fact that such a profession existed and was essential to the castle's functioning tells you everything you need to know about the scale of the problem. His clothes, his skin, his hair, they all carry the unmissable aroma of his work. You can only imagine the kind of social standing a person with that job would have had. As you wander through the various courtyards, you are struck by the sheer volume of animal life. Chickens, geese, and pigs roam freely in their pens, contributing their own animalistic scents. The dogs, which you now realize are everywhere, add another layer of smell, a combination of damp fur and, well, everything else they've rolled in. You can't escape it. The smell of the castle is an omnipresent character in this story, more powerful than any lord or knight. It seeps into the tapestries, clings to the stone walls, and permeates every single thing in this place. It's the background music of medieval life, and it's always on full volume. A gust of wind blows through the courtyard, a welcome relief for a moment, until you realize it's just carrying the smells from one part of the castle to another, like a natural castle-wide air diffuser. And just like that, the new smell you notice, the sour, earthy smell of the cesspit, is now everywhere. You realize that your nose, the one thing you rely on to tell you what's good and what's bad, has been completely hijacked. It's an unsettling thought, a subtle form of torment that would never make it into a movie, but which would have been a daily reality for every single person who called this place home. You're beginning to understand that the physical structure of the castle, its stone walls and high towers, was only half the defense. The other half was this miasma of filth, a silent, invisible barrier that would have been enough to make most people turn tail and run. As you try to find a place to sit, you realize that every surface, every piece of wood, every stone bench carries its own unique and unpleasant scent. The only solution, it seems, is to find a way to stop smelling altogether, a feat that is unfortunately impossible. As the sun climbs higher in the sky, you can feel the warmth of the day beginning to intensify the smells, turning what was a low-grade hum into a full-on symphony of stench. It's an unfortunate side effect of the heat. The warmer it gets, the more the odors bloom like some kind of grotesque floral arrangement designed by a troll. You look at the grand architecture, the impressive towers, and the intricate stonework, and you can only think of one thing. They really should have invested in some kind of industrial-strength air freshener. But of course they didn't. They just lived with it day after day, year after year. Your senses have now adjusted, or perhaps just given up on the constant symphony of smells, and you find yourself once again in the Great Hall, this time with a grumbling stomach. The promise of a meal sounds like the only thing that can redeem this experience. But as you watch the bustling activity, a new kind of dread begins to set in. You're about to encounter the culinary ordeal of castle life, a journey that's less about a feast and more about a calculated gamble with your digestive system. You watch as the food is brought in from the kitchens, a process that seems to defy all modern standards of food safety. There are no refrigerators, of course, no cling wrap, no sanitary surfaces. The kitchen is a sooty, chaotic place where mice and rats are a common sight, and the food is prepared over an open fire that coats everything in a layer of grime. You see a cook wipe his hands on a greasy apron before picking up a piece of meat, and you instinctively recoil. This isn't a restaurant, it's a factory for sustenance, and its primary goal is not flavor or cleanliness, but simply to provide enough calories to keep the castle running. You can almost hear the unsaid mantra of the castle's cooks. If it doesn't kill you, it's good enough. You realize that the farm-to-table movement would look a whole lot different if it meant a trip to a medieval castle. It'd be more like farm-to-table to stomach ache to latrine. The food itself, you soon learn, is a lesson in monotony and necessity. For the common folk and even the lower-ranking knights, the staple meal is pottage. This is a thick stew, a kind of mushy porridge made from grains, peas, beans, and whatever vegetables are in season, cooked in a giant cauldron over the fire. It's a nutritious but incredibly bland and repetitive dish. You're given a bowl of it, and it's a grimy gray substance that seems to have a few floating bits of something in it. The lack of variety is staggering. Your diet would be almost identical day after day, week after week. If you're lucky, you get a piece of bread to dip in it, but the bread is often hard, stale, and coarse, full of bran and grit. It's certainly not the fluffy white stuff you're used to. It's so hard you could probably use it as a weapon in a pinch. It really puts a new spin on the phrase, "Give us this day our daily bread." It's more like, "Give us this day our daily rock, please." For the Lord and his immediate family, the menu is slightly more varied, but not by much. There is more meat, but it's almost always either roasted or boiled, and it's heavily salted to preserve it. The meat is tough and stringy, a far cry from the tender cuts you're accustomed to. The salt is so pervasive that your mouth feels perpetually dry. There are no vegetables or fresh fruits to speak of for much of the year as they spoil quickly. The only vegetables available would be root vegetables that could be stored for the winter, and they are almost always boiled to a mushy pulp. The taste is a monotonous cycle of salt and fat. You'd think the nobility would have a better diet, but in a world without refrigeration, they were just as limited by the seasons and the available preservation techniques. You're presented with a roasted boar, a massive beast with its skin blackened from the fire. It's an impressive sight, but as you get closer, you notice a sharp, slightly rancid smell. The boar was probably killed a week ago and just heavily spiced to hide the fact that it's not exactly fresh. This brings up a popular historical fact. The widespread use of spices like pepper, cloves, and nutmeg in medieval cuisine wasn't just for flavor. It was a crucial way to mask the unpleasant taste of meat that was on the verge of spoiling. Scholars continue to debate the true extent of food waste in the medieval castle given the ever-present threat of famine and the value placed on every scrap. While there were grand feasts, there were also lean times, and food was a precious resource. You see the leftover scraps from the Lord's table being scraped into a trough for the dogs, and the trenchers you were given last night, the ones you didn't eat, are collected. An interesting detail is that these used trenchers were often given to the poor people gathered outside the castle walls. It was a form of charity that served a dual purpose. It was a pious act that earned the Lord favor in the eyes of God, and it also got rid of the soiled and stale bread in an efficient manner. It's a powerful illustration of the fact that nothing was wasted, not even the dirty dishes. And what about drinks? You find yourself getting thirsty from the overly salted food, but you're not about to drink the water from the well in the bailey, which is undoubtedly contaminated by the constant runoff and general filth. A common historical fact is that water was rarely, if ever, a safe source of hydration. Because of this, people drank ale or small beer, a low-alcohol brew made from grains, which was safer because it had been boiled in the brewing process. For the nobility, there was wine often watered down, or mead a drink made from fermented honey. You're given a tankard of ale and it's warm and bitter, but you gratefully drink it down knowing it's your safest bet. It's almost impossible to imagine a world where the only safe beverage is a low-alcohol beer, but that was the reality. You realize that your daily hydration would likely involve a mild, perpetual buzz. It would certainly make the smells a lot more tolerable. The sheer unpredictability of food is another source of stress. Without modern farming and transportation, the castle's larder was entirely dependent on the seasons and the local harvest. A bad harvest meant a long, hungry winter. The Lord might have a store of preserved meat and grain, but for everyone else, the threat of famine was never far away. The celebratory feasts you see in movies were not the norm. They were rare occasions that marked important holidays or military victories. The everyday reality was a much more humble and often unsavory affair. You watch as a cook pulls a fish from a bucket. It looks suspiciously slimy and smells of the river bottom it was just pulled from. It's destined for tonight's meal. It's another reminder that your food is not coming from a sanitized grocery store, but from the raw and unpredictable world right outside the castle walls. And sometimes the world outside is full of things that can make you very, very sick. You're beginning to understand that every meal was a minor miracle and a major risk. The food, the drink, the methods of cooking and preservation, it's all a testament to the fact that convenience and safety were simply not options. You are a part of a food chain that is short, brutal, and entirely dependent on the whims of nature and the questionable sanitation practices of the cooks. You can't just order a pizza. You can't get a sandwich. You can't even get a clean cup of water. Your options are what's available, what's in season, and what hasn't been contaminated by the ever-present filth. The experience is both humbling and a little terrifying. As you chew on a particularly gristly piece of salted pork, you can't help but dream of a simple, fresh salad. But you know that's a luxury that doesn't exist here. It's a life where every meal is a struggle, and the greatest indulgence you can hope for is not getting sick. You can almost feel your body getting ready to wage a war on the bacteria. You just ingested a silent battle that was just as much a part of castle life as any siege or skirmish. The thought of it is enough to make you tired. You've survived the smells, the questionable food, and the general chaos of castle life, but a new necessity pulls you from the relative safety of the stone walls. Perhaps you are a knight on a mission for your lord, a merchant seeking a new market, or a messenger carrying vital news. Whatever the reason you find yourself at the portcullis once more, the massive iron gate creaking ominously as it rises. You are about to discover that the medieval world beyond the castle is far more dangerous and uncomfortable than the world within it. This isn't a leisurely road trip. It's a desperate, punishing struggle against nature and the very worst of humanity. This is a journey with no GPS, no roadside assistance, and a whole lot of unpleasant surprises. It's the kind of trip that would make you beg for a traffic jam on the interstate. The road is not what you would call a road. It's a muddy, rutted track that seems to have no clear path. It's a testament to the fact that people in this era didn't travel much, and when they did, they had to be truly committed. The ground is a mix of sticky mud and sharp stones. Your feet sink in with every step, and you can feel the sucking pull of the earth. If you were on horseback, your mount would be constantly struggling to find purchase its hooves, clattering on rocks and sinking into puddles. The journey is physically exhausting from the very first step. You can feel the strain in your muscles and the ache in your bones as you fight against the terrain. There are no paved shoulders, no clear markings, just a general direction. Your Google Maps of the era is probably a vague set of directions from a local who told you to follow the big oak tree and then turn left at the stream. Good luck with that. The weather is an immediate and unyielding enemy. The sun beats down on you a harsh, unforgiving heat that makes the dust rise in choking clouds. There are no rest stops, no air-conditioned cafes to duck into. You're exposed to the elements with no relief. If it rains, the dirt track turns into a river of mud, making every step a monumental effort. The wind howls, a sharp, cold presence that cuts right through your simple wool tunic. There is no waterproof clothing, no Gore-Tex. You are at the mercy of the sky, and you are entirely unprepared. You can already feel the beginnings of a chill, a deep, pervasive cold that will linger in your bones for days. You're starting to understand why people in this time period didn't just take a weekend getaway to the coast. It was simply not a viable option. And then there are the people. The world outside the castle walls is lawless and dangerous. A common historical fact is that highwaymen and bandits were a constant threat to travelers. Without a strong, centralized police force, the roads were often controlled by whoever had the most swords and the fewest morals. You are a tempting target. Your clothes, your horse, the few coins you might be carrying, it's all a prize for someone with nothing to lose. Every shadow, every thicket of trees, every twist in the road feels like a potential ambush. You find yourself constantly scanning the horizon, your heart hammering in your chest, a quiet anxiety that never truly goes away. You hear a sound in the distance, a snapped twig or a rustle in the leaves, and your entire body tenses. It could be nothing a rabbit or a bird, but it could just as easily be a group of desperate men with knives. The sense of isolation is profound. You are alone out here, miles from the nearest village or castle, and there is no one to help you. The medieval equivalent of roadside assistance is probably just a prayer and a quick drawing of your sword. Historians continue to debate whether the popular image of medieval roads as being overrun by bandits is a reality or a dramatic exaggeration, though records of documented highwaymen suggest the threat was far from a myth. The degree of danger likely varied from region to region, but the fear was always there. An interesting detail is that to travel safely through certain territories, you often had to carry a letter of safe conduct, a document from a local lord or king that guaranteed your safe passage. Without it, you could be arrested, robbed, or worse. The very existence of such a document is a powerful illustration of the inherent danger of travel. You realize that even if you have a letter, there's no guarantee that the next band of rogues you meet will be able to read or care. The physical toll of the journey is immense. If you're riding a horse, you develop saddle sores and your muscles ache from the constant jarring motion. If you're on foot, your boots become waterlogged and muddy and your feet are a mass of blisters. The constant exhaustion, the stress of the unknown, and the exposure to the elements all combine to wear you down. You can't just stop and get a room at a Motel 6. You have to find a monastery or an abbey, which were often the only reliable places to get a meal and a bed. Or you have to camp in the open, exposed to the cold and the dangers of the night. A night spent sleeping on the hard, cold ground with only a thin blanket and the stars for company makes you long for the relative comfort of your uncomfortable Great Hall bench. The in-flight entertainment on this trip is just the sound of a creaking cartwheel, your own ragged breathing, and the distant howl of a wolf. Even for the most powerful figures, travel was a brutal experience. A knight on campaign would be burdened by heavy armor, and his horse would be weighed down by supplies. The journey was often as hard as the battle itself. You can almost feel the chafing of the leather straps against your skin, the weight of the sword at your hip, and the bone-deep weariness that settles in after a long day of riding. There's no air conditioning, no comfortable seat, and no music to distract you. You're alone with your thoughts and the constant nagging fear that a bad turn in the road or an unlucky encounter could be the end of your journey. You finally understand that the castle, for all its problems, was a sanctuary. It was a place where you knew the dangers, where you could at least find some semblance of safety from the outside world. And as you trudge down the muddy road with your stomach grumbling and your feet aching, you realize that your destination is a long way off. You've still got miles to go, and every one of them is a test of your endurance. A test you're not sure you can pass. The thought of that nice warm bed, that hot shower, and a clean pair of pajamas now feels like the most beautiful and impossible dream in the world. The only thing you can do is put one foot in front of the other and hope for the best. You've made it. After a grueling journey filled with mud, fear, and exhaustion, you finally see the familiar outline of the castle looming in the distance. The sight of the stone walls feels like a miracle, a promise of warmth and safety. You pass through the gate and find a quiet corner to collapse the relief washing over you in a wave. But as the adrenaline fades and the dust settles, you begin to notice something else, something just as insidious as the threats outside. The castle, for all its strength, is a profoundly uncomfortable place to live. The physical discomfort of this stone fortress is a constant bone-deep battle that never ends. The first thing you notice is the cold. It's a different kind of cold than the one you experienced on the road. It's a passive, pervasive cold that seeps into your very bones. The massive stone walls built to withstand a siege are also highly effective at holding a chill. They act like a giant refrigerator, drawing the warmth from the air and radiating a constant clammy dampness. It's a cold that no amount of clothing seems to be able to ward off. You can feel the moisture in the air, a dampness that clings to your skin and makes everything feel slightly slick. The thought of a modern home with its insulation and central heating feels like an impossible dream, a fantasy of pure comfort. You find a stone bench to rest on, and the cold seeps into your muscles, making you shiver uncontrollably. This is what you have to look forward to every single night and every single morning. And then there's the lighting. The castle's architects weren't thinking about ambiance or a lack of eye strain, they were thinking about defense. The windows are tiny slits in the thick walls designed to be defensible, not to let in light. They are often unglazed, just simple holes in the stone, and are covered with shutters or oiled cloth to keep out the wind and rain. This means that even in the middle of the day, the castle's interior is a place of perpetual gloom. The only light comes from flickering torches and candles, which are expensive and smoky. The air is thick with the smell of burning fat and wax, and a greasy soot coats every surface. The gloom is so profound that it feels like a physical presence, a weight on your shoulders that makes you want to squint just to see where you're going. You can imagine a medieval person's version of a light bulb joke would be less about how many people it takes to screw one in and more about how much money it costs to keep the place from being a complete black hole. It's a constant low-grade torture that makes every task from reading a document to eating a meal an exercise in frustration. The lack of effective heating is another major issue. The Great Hall has a massive fireplace, but it's an incredibly inefficient way to heat a room. The smoke is supposed to vent up the chimney, but in reality, a lot of it just drifts back into the room, stinging your eyes and making it hard to breathe. Scholars still debate just how effective these massive open fireplaces were at heating a room versus simply venting smoke, but you can feel it firsthand. The heat is all concentrated near the hearth, and a few feet away, you are back in the cold. It's a testament to how difficult it was to stay warm in this environment. You can huddle around the fire with everyone else, but the smoke and the crowd make it a less than pleasant experience. An interesting detail is the use of tapestries. You might think they were just for decoration, but they served a crucial practical purpose. They were hung on the stone walls to help insulate the room and to block the constant drafts that whistled through every crack and crevice. They were the medieval equivalent of a down comforter for the castle walls, a much-needed defense against the cold. The Great Hall, for all its grandeur, is not a place of comfort or privacy. It's a communal living space, a hub of constant activity. It's where you eat, where you socialize, where you work, and where you often sleep. Privacy is a concept that simply doesn't exist. There are no private bedrooms for most people, and even for the lord and his family, the bedchamber is often just a slightly more private corner of the hall, separated by a curtain. The noise is constant. The clatter of plates, the shouting of commands, the barking of dogs, the snores of 100 sleeping bodies. You long for a quiet moment, a space where you can just be alone with your thoughts, but that's not an option. You realize that in a medieval castle, you are never truly alone, and you are never truly at rest. It's an exhausting environment that would wear down even the most patient person. A little joke comes to mind. You could yell, "I need some personal space," when at the top of your lungs in a medieval castle, and everyone would just look at you like you were insane. Even the most basic tasks are made harder by the physical reality of the place. You have to climb steep, uneven stone stairs to get to different levels of the castle. The staircases are often spiraled to the right, a clever defensive measure that gives a right-handed swordsman an advantage, but which also makes every trip up or down a potential sprained ankle. The cold, the gloom, the lack of privacy, and the constant physical discomfort all add up to a profound sense of misery. This isn't a glamorous home. It's a giant drafty stone box that you're trapped in. It's a place designed for survival, not for comfort. You can feel the effects of the cold and damp on your joints. They are stiff and ache. Your skin feels perpetually clammy, and the lack of sunlight is starting to affect your mood. It's a kind of pervasive physical and mental exhaustion that you can't escape. You are trapped in a home that is actively trying to make you miserable, a home that seems to have a personality of its own, and its personality is an ancient, grumpy rock. You can't help but think that a small, modern apartment with its running water and central heat is more of a palace than this ever could be. You've come to terms with the cold, the gloom, and the lack of privacy, but as you settle into the rhythm of castle life, a new and more terrifying reality begins to emerge. This isn't just a place of physical discomfort. It's a place of profound social insecurity. Your life, your freedom, your very existence are entirely at the whim of the Lord who holds sway over these lands. The law is not a system of rules and precedents. It is a single man's word, and that word is as fickle and unpredictable as the weather. You are about to face the chilling reality of medieval justice, a system that is often less about what is right and more about who has the power. It's the kind of legal system that makes you grateful for even the smallest of courtroom dramas on TV. You witness a man being dragged into the Great Hall, his arms bound with rough rope. His crime: he was caught stealing a chicken from the castle's poultry yard. The Lord sits on his high-backed chair eating a piece of bread and barely looks up. There's no jury, no legal counsel, no witness testimony. The man's fate is decided in a matter of seconds. The Lord asks a single question: "Did you do it?" The man, shivering with fear, mumbles something you can't quite hear. The Lord shrugs. "Put him in the stocks for a week." He commands, and then goes back to his meal. Just like that, the man's life is put on hold, and he is condemned to a week of public humiliation and punishment. An interesting detail about this type of punishment is the stocks and pillory, which were common tools of public justice. They were wooden frames with holes for the hands, feet, and neck, designed to hold the offender in an awkward and painful position. It was a form of justice that served a dual purpose. It punished the offender and served as a very public warning to everyone else. The laughter of the crowd, the insults, and the rotten vegetables thrown at the man would be a constant, humiliating torment. A medieval joke about due process would probably be, "My lord, I'm innocent." "Oh, I'm sure you are. Now off to the pillory with you." It's a sobering reality, one that makes you realize that your rights are exactly what the Lord says they are and not a single bit more. But what if the crime is more serious? What if the Lord isn't so sure of the person's guilt? This is where the truly terrifying aspects of medieval law come into play. A common historical fact is the use of trial by ordeal. This was a brutal and seemingly illogical way of determining innocence, but it was accepted by the church and the people. You see a man accused of a serious crime being prepared for a trial by hot iron. A red-hot iron bar is brought out glowing in the dim light. The man has to carry the iron for a certain number of steps. His hands are then bound, and after 3 days, if the wounds have begun to heal cleanly, it is believed that God has shown his innocence. If not, he is deemed guilty. It's a terrifying gamble, one that seems impossible to win. The man's face is a mask of pure terror. You realize that a system of justice based on divine intervention is no system at all. It's a lottery of fate, a coin flip where the consequences are life and death. The sheer brutality of it is sickening. Historians still debate the extent to which the church's influence tempered the brutality of secular justice, or simply added a spiritual layer to it. On one hand, the church often provided sanctuary and a more reasoned form of justice, but on the other, the concept of trial by ordeal was endorsed by the church, a practice that seems to us to be nothing more than torture. The complexity of it is a powerful reminder that medieval justice was a tangled web of faith, power, and fear. You watch as a man is being prepared for a trial by water. His hands and feet are bound, and he is lowered into a pond. If he sinks, he is deemed innocent. If he floats, he is deemed guilty, as the water, a pure element, is said to have rejected him. The logic is as twisted as the crime itself, and you can only watch horrified as the man's fate is decided not by evidence but by a medieval version of a swimming test. It's a reminder that in this world there is no appeal, no higher court to turn to. The Lord and his strange, brutal system are the only things that stand between you and the gallows. The ultimate punishment is the dungeon. You pass by a small, heavy door set low in the wall, and the cold that seeps from it is different. It's a bone-chilling, oppressive cold that smells of damp earth and despair. The clatter of chains and a low, mournful moan can be heard from within. This isn't a modern prison. It's a dark, cold hole, a place where people are sent to rot. It's a truly terrifying thought. A crime that might get you a few years in a modern prison, like stealing food, could land you in a dungeon for the rest of your life. The Lord has the power of life and death over his subjects, and he can be as capricious as he wants. There's no legal defense, no one to argue on your behalf. All you can do is hope to stay in the Lord's good graces. And what's a good medieval legal defense? I swear on my honor that the chicken just followed me home, my lord. It's a powerless, frightening existence where a bad day for your ruler could be a fatal day for you. You realize that all the physical discomforts of the castle, the cold, the smells, the grime, are nothing compared to the constant psychological torment of living under such an arbitrary system. You have no security, no rights, and no guarantee that the justice you receive will be fair. The smallest mistake, the slightest perceived slight, could lead to a brutal and public punishment. The fear is a constant companion, a heavy cloak that you can never take off. It's a subtle but powerful feeling that makes you long for the predictable if boring nature of modern law. This is a place where you are always on your guard, always watching what you say, and always hoping that the Lord stays in a good mood. This is what it truly meant to live under a feudal system. It wasn't just about land and loyalty, it was about the very real power one person had over the lives of hundreds, and the often terrible things they chose to do with it. You've learned that the physical world of the castle is a brutal one, and the legal world is just as terrifying. But as you watch a young boy in the bailey fall and scrape his knee on the stone, you are reminded of a threat that is even more insidious, more pervasive, and more likely to kill you than any bandit or angry lord disease. The castle is a breeding ground for sickness, and the people here have almost no defense against it. You are about to witness the chilling reality of medieval medicine, a world where the line between healing and hocus pocus is blurry at best, and where a simple ailment can be a death sentence. A woman is brought into the great hall, her face pale and clammy. She is shivering, and you can tell she has a fever. In the modern world, this would be a simple trip to the doctor, a quick diagnosis, and a few days of rest and medication. But here, the situation is treated with a mix of fear and superstition. Her illness is not seen as a simple biological problem. It's seen as a possible spiritual affliction, a punishment from God, or even the work of an evil spirit. A priest is called to say a prayer over her, and a few old women mutter incantations under their breath. This is the chilling reality of a world without a scientific understanding of disease. A common historical fact is that illnesses were often attributed to these supernatural or moral causes, which meant that the cure was just as likely to be a religious ritual as a medical procedure. It's the kind of thing that makes you appreciate the fact that when you get a cold, you don't immediately start to wonder what you did to anger the gods. The doctor, if you can call him that, is a man with a set of rusty tools and a questionable-looking leather apron. He is a barber surgeon, an interesting detail that highlights the dual nature of medicine in this era. Barbers had sharp knives for trimming hair, and so they were also trusted with cutting into people for medical procedures, from lancing boils to pulling teeth, and even performing amputations. It's a terrifying thought the person who gives you a haircut might also be the one who tries to save your life. He holds up a sharp, dirty blade to the light, and you can already tell that whatever he does, it will probably do more harm than good. You realize that a trip to the doctor isn't a source of comfort here. It's a source of even more terror. His treatment of the woman is based on the popular but deeply flawed theory of the four humors. This was the belief that the human body was made of four basic fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, and that illness was caused by an imbalance of these humors. The cure, therefore, was to restore the balance. In the case of a fever which was believed to be caused by an excess of blood, the solution was simple and brutally common bloodletting. You watch horrified as the barber surgeon makes a small incision on the woman's arm, and a dark, thick blood begins to ooze into a bowl. He also applies leeches to her skin, another common practice, as they were believed to suck the bad blood out. This is a common historical fact, but seeing it in person is a far more visceral experience. The woman's face is a mixture of fear and exhaustion, and you can only pray that she doesn't die from the very cure that's supposed to save her. Scholars still debate how effective these medieval herbal remedies were in practice, and how much of their success was simply a placebo effect or a matter of luck. While modern science confirms some plants like willow bark, a source of aspirin, had medicinal properties. The lack of proper dosages and understanding of how these plants worked meant that they were often more of a gamble than a sure thing. The pharmacist of the era was a garden patch, and your medicine was whatever concoction the local herbalist brewed up. A gentle joke that comes to mind is that doctors' orders in the Middle Ages would probably just be lie down, say a prayer, and try not to die. It's a terrifyingly accurate summation of the state of healthcare. And it's not just the dramatic illnesses. The lack of sanitation and hygiene that you've already experienced makes every single day a potential health hazard. The dirty water you drink, the vermin that infest the hall, the unwashed bodies and clothing of the people around you, it's all a recipe for disaster. Smallpox, dysentery, measles, and a host of other diseases are a constant invisible enemy. Even a minor cut or scrape can become a life-threatening infection as there are no antibiotics. The simplest scratch can become inflamed and fester, and without any understanding of germs, people just had to hope for the best. You realize that the medieval castle isn't just a place of power and prestige. It's a death trap, and the people inside are constantly at risk from a silent and invisible enemy. It's a chilling thought that the very air you breathe could be full of germs that could kill you. The lack of understanding, the reliance on superstition, and the brutal, ineffective treatments all combine to create a world where getting sick isn't just an inconvenience. It's a source of profound fear and uncertainty. The best thing you can do for your health is to avoid getting sick at all, and in this environment that feels like an impossible task. You've seen the castle from the perspective of a servant, a traveler, and a subject under the Lord's law. Now you find yourself in the inner sanctum, observing the life of the privileged. You might think that being a lord or lady surrounded by wealth and power would be a life of ease and happiness. But as you watch the Lord sit at his high table, his expression one of weary resignation. You begin to understand that power has its own price, and that price is often paid in boredom and emotional isolation. The castle, for all its splendor, can be a golden cage, and for the nobility life here, often sucked in a completely different way. The first thing you notice is the crushing monotony. The Lord's Day is a relentless cycle of repetition. He wakes, he prays, he eats. He deals with petitions, he eats again, he hunts, he eats again, and then he goes to bed. There is no variety, no new information, no sense of adventure. There is no Netflix, no video games, no endless scroll of social media to pass the time. The only entertainment is what the minstrels play or what the jesters perform, and even that must get old after a while. You can almost see the profound boredom etched on the faces of the people around you, a silent, pervasive misery that no amount of fine food or expensive wine can cure. You realize that the Netflix and chill of the era would probably involve sitting in a drafty room, listening to a guy with a lute sing the same song he sang yesterday. It's an exhausting thought. And then there's the constant social pressure. As a member of the nobility, you are always on display. Every gesture, every word, every meal is a performance. The rituals of the court are endless and strict. You have to sit just so, eat just so, and speak just so. You can't just relax and be yourself. Your life is a series of choreographed moments, all designed to reinforce your social standing and the power of your family. You watch as a young woman, a lady of the court is reprimanded by her mother for a slight misstep in etiquette. The humiliation is palpable. You realize that a modern-day swiping right would be a lot less casual in this world. It would be a political treaty, a social contract that you would be bound by for the rest of your life. The constant need to be on would be a crushing burden, a weight that would never leave you. An interesting detail is the role of the jester or fool. While they might seem like a simple form of entertainment, they served a crucial purpose. They were often the only person in the court who could speak the truth to the lord or king without fear of retribution. They could use humor and satire to point out the lord's flaws or the absurdity of a situation, something that a noble would never dare to do. The jester's role highlights the fact that even for the most powerful person in the castle, the lack of honest feedback and true companionship was a profound and isolating problem. The very existence of the jester proves that the Lord lived in an echo chamber of flattery and fear. But perhaps the most profound source of misery for the nobility was the lack of choice in who you marry. A common historical fact is that noble marriages were almost never about love. They were political alliances, arrangements made between two families to secure land power or influence. You see a young lord and his wife at the high table, and they barely speak to one another. There is no warmth between them, no sign of affection. They are simply two people who have been forced to live together a business partnership in human form. You realize that your own life, your dreams, and your hopes would all be sacrificed for the good of your family. A modern-day wedding vow might say, for richer or for poorer in sickness and in health. But a medieval one would probably be more like, for land and for power in alliances and in bloodlines. It's an arrangement that would lead to a life of emotional distance, a loneliness that would be even more profound because you are surrounded by so many people. Historians continue to debate whether noble couples, even in arranged marriages, found love and companionship, or if they lived in a state of perpetual emotional distance. While some certainly did, the societal structure and the lack of choice meant that many likely lived a life of quiet desperation. The lack of autonomy is a pervasive problem. Even the lord who seems to have absolute power is a slave to his duty. He has to manage his lands, deal with a constant stream of petitioners, and be ready for war at a moment's notice. He can't just pack up and leave. He is a part of the castle, a cog in a massive machine. The thought of all that responsibility, all that weight, with none of the modern escapes of entertainment or personal freedom, is exhausting. You realize that even in the most beautiful and lavishly decorated parts of the castle, there is no true comfort, no real happiness. It's all a show, a carefully constructed illusion of power that hides a deep and abiding misery. The castle is a fortress not just against its enemies, but against the outside world, and that also means it's a fortress against any new or interesting experiences. You have experienced the boredom, the political intrigue, and the emotional isolation of noble life, but a sudden piercing shriek from the watchtower shatters the quiet gloom. The sound is an immediate visceral punch to the gut, a call to arms that you instinctively know means one thing: conflict. The castle, for all its social and physical problems, was built for this purpose, and this purpose alone. You are about to discover the most terrifying reality of all, that living in a medieval castle meant living under a constant grinding siege of everyday life. A perpetual state of readiness for war that could turn your uncomfortable home into a deadly trap at any moment. The alarm sounds and the castle erupts into a controlled chaos. Guards rush to their positions on the battlements, their shouts echoing in the narrow spaces. The sounds of doors being barred and weapons being drawn fill the air. The castle security system, you realize, is just a few angry guys with pointy sticks, and that's not exactly reassuring. You run to the nearest parapet and look out. In the distance, a column of armed men, a rival lord's raiding party, is riding toward the castle. This isn't a full-blown siege, just a minor skirmish, but the fear is no less real. This is the background noise of life here, the low-level constant hum of violence that could erupt at any moment. You have no safe space, no true sanctuary. Even within these thick stone walls, you are always on the edge of a fight. It's a life of high-alert anxiety that would wear down anyone's nerves. But what if it isn't a raid? What if it's a full-blown siege? The thought sends a shiver down your spine. A siege isn't a battle, it's a slow, grinding war of attrition. The attackers don't need to break down the walls, they just need to wait. And as a besieged person, you are trapped, your only company, the hundreds of other people crammed into the fortress with you. You have to ration food, and the fear of starvation is a constant, gnawing presence. The water from the well, already questionable, becomes even more precious and more likely to be contaminated. And with so many people in close quarters, disease spreads like wildfire. An interesting detail is the horrifying use of early biological warfare. Attackers would sometimes use trebuchets to hurl disease-ridden corpses or animal carcasses over the walls. It was a crude but effective way to spread plague and sickness among the defenders, turning the castle from a safe haven into a giant petri dish of death. You can just imagine the terror, not from a sword but from an invisible enemy in the air. The home invasion of the era wasn't just a few armed men. It was a catapult hurling rotten meat at you. The brutal reality of military rule is another unpleasant aspect. The castle is not just a home, it's a military barracks. Everyone has a job, and that job is often to be ready to fight or support those who do. The discipline is rigid, and the punishments for minor infractions are swift and brutal, as you've already seen. There is no personal freedom. Your life is dictated by the needs of the castle's defense. The daily routine is a series of drills, patrols, and preparations for a battle that may or may not come. The tension is palpable, a silent but constant presence that hangs over everything. The sound of metal on stone as a guard sharpens his sword, the clatter of armor, and the shouts of the captain during a drill, it all reminds you that you are living in a giant war machine, and your life is just a small part of it. Historians still debate whether a well-designed and properly manned castle was truly a near-impregnable fortress, or if its perceived strength was more of a psychological deterrent that was ultimately susceptible to a long, grinding siege. The historical records are full of examples of castles that fell not to a breached wall but to starvation, disease, or betrayal from within. The reality is that the castle, for all its power, was a fragile illusion of safety. It was a symbol of strength, but it was also a tomb waiting to happen. The thought of being trapped inside during a long, cold winter, watching your food supplies dwindle and the people around you get sick, is a truly terrifying thought. A gentle joke about a battle plan would be a lot less funny in this context. It would probably be a vague drawing on a piece of parchment that's already stained with ale and mud, and your fate would depend on it. The brutality of medieval warfare is something you will never forget. There were no Geneva Conventions, no rules of engagement. The fighting was up close and personal with swords and maces, and the only goal was to kill or be killed. You see the knights preparing their weapons, their faces grim and determined. You can feel the weight of their purpose, the profound and terrible reality of their lives. A battle isn't a movie scene. It's a terrifying, brutal, and bloody affair. And the fear of it, the constant knowledge that it could happen at any time, is a form of psychological torture. You realize that the castle isn't just a home. It's a cage, a place where you are trapped with the people you are supposed to defend, and the people who are just as scared as you are. The constant vigilance, the fear of attack, and the brutal reality of warfare all combine to make life in a medieval castle a terrifying and deeply unsettling experience. The only true peace, it seems, is the kind that can only be found outside of these walls, and that's not a place you are ever truly safe. The tension has broken. The attackers for now have retreated, and the castle, battered but still standing, begins to settle back into its uneasy rhythm. You stand on the parapet and look out at the landscape, and for the first time, you can truly see the castle for what it is, a living contradiction. It is a symbol of power, yet it is powerless against the simple indignities of cold, hunger, and disease. It is a sanctuary, yet it is a prison. It is a home, yet it offers none of the comforts you take for granted. You've come a long way from the fairy tale notions of glorious knights and elegant ladies. You've seen the truth of the medieval castle, and it is a truth that is grimy, brutal, and deeply, deeply unsettling. You think back on all you've seen and felt. The pervasive, stomach-churning smell that clung to every person and every object, a constant reminder of the lack of sanitation. The food, a monotonous and risky gamble, with every meal where a piece of bad meat could be a death sentence. The cold and dampness that seeped into your bones, a physical torment that never truly left you, a constant shiver you couldn't shake. The chilling reality of a legal system where your life was in the hands of one person whose mood was the only thing that stood between you and a life in a cold, dark dungeon. The ever-present threat of disease, a silent killer that could take you or your family at any moment. And finally, the constant fear of war, the low-level anxiety that made every single day a matter of survival, a test of your resolve. You realize that a medieval person's version of going for a walk to clear my head would be a risky venture with a high chance of getting robbed or killed. But as you look at the people around you, you also see something else. You see a man laughing at a particularly bad joke told by the jester. You see a group of women mending clothes together, their conversation filled with a quiet companionship. You see a child chasing a dog with pure, unadulterated joy. You realize that even in this place of profound hardship, there were moments of small, simple joys. The warmth of a fire in the dead of winter, the rich taste of a truly good piece of cheese, the sound of a minstrel's song. These moments were not just fleeting pleasures, they were the very things that made life bearable. A common historical fact is that, in the absence of personal space, a strong sense of community would have developed. People depended on each other in a way that we can barely imagine. They had to. Their survival depended on it. An interesting detail is the vital role of storytelling and oral tradition in a world without widespread literacy. In the long dark nights of winter, the people of the castle would gather around the fire, and a storyteller would spin tales of heroes, monsters, and great deeds. These stories were a way to escape the harsh reality of their lives, a way to pass down history and culture, and a way to connect with one another. They were the television shows, the movies, and the books of the era, and they were a crucial part of what made life here more than just a struggle for survival. They were a reminder that even in a dark, cold, and dirty world, there was still a place for imagination and hope. A gentle joke about that would be that their favorite streaming service was Fireside TV, with all episodes being a new story. Historians continue to debate whether the hardships of medieval life fostered a deeper appreciation for simple pleasures, or if they simply made every day a struggle for survival. The answer is likely somewhere in the middle. The people of the castle were not just victims of their time, they were survivors. They found a way to live, to laugh, and to love, even in the face of all the things that truly sucked about their lives. They had a resilience that we in our climate-controlled, sanitized, and relatively safe world can only marvel at. You realize that the castle wasn't just a building. It was a testament to the sheer tenacity of the human spirit. It was a place where people lived and died and found a way to be human, even when everything around them was trying to make them miserable. You can almost feel the presence of all those who came before you, their stories etched into the very stone of the castle walls. Their lives a quiet but powerful reminder of just how good we have it today. Now, as the moon climbs high above the castle turrets and the sounds of the day begin to fade, you find a quiet corner. The warmth of the fire, a gentle blanket against the chill of the stone. The flickering light of the torches casts long, dancing shadows on the walls, and the soft rustle of the rushes on the floor is the only sound that remains. The weight of this journey, all the sights and sounds and smells begins to lift. The fear, the discomfort, the gnawing anxiety, all of it slowly recedes like the tide going out to sea. The castle, which seemed so alive with struggle just a moment ago, is now just a shadow against the night sky, a quiet sentinel of a time long past. You can let it go now. You are not there anymore. The stone is no longer cold. The air is no longer thick with grime. The danger has faded into history where it belongs. You are safe. The memories are just that, memories. You can ease back into your own comfortable soft bed in your quiet, warm home and just relax. The stories are told. The journey is over. There's nothing left to do but drift away.